Welcome back to the podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about body recomposition. This is probably the primary goal that I hear that most women are trying to achieve when they are talking about their fitness goals. This is one that I commonly hear, and it is losing body fat and building muscle mass at the same time. Or a better way to describe it is changing your body composition. So we're adjusting the amount of muscle mass that we have on our body. We're trying to increase that and make ourselves really lean and tone, and we're trying to lose fat simultaneously. And I want to run through this because this is, like I said, the most common goal that I hear as a fitness coach. Most women come in saying they want a little bit of both, and they're trying to reach a bigger goal of just changing up their body composition. They want to look more lean, they want to look more toned, they want to look more fit. And I think that's a perfect way to describe just kind of like the end physique goal that you're trying to reach, but it's easier said than done. And if you do it wrong, you can be in a place where you feel like you're always stuck, that your effort doesn't match the results that you get, and you can be putting in a lot of effort and not seeing a lot of results. And there's a big mismatch between the expectations and the reality of what happens at a recomp, the timeline in which it takes to achieve a complete recomp and what that actually looks like, because there is a process in which is required for fat loss and a process in which that is required for muscle mass. And doing them at the same time has to be very structured and strategic. And if you don't do it properly, you will find yourself going months on end, working towards a goal and not seeing a lot of payoff from it and just feeling like it's never going to work for you. So I want to run through exactly what a recomp is and how to do it effectively so that you can have better results without feeling like you're burning out all the time and you're just throwing things at the wall. So like I said, a body recomp is basically a recomposition of your body mass. And your body mass is made up of a bunch of different things, including your water weight, fat mass, muscle mass, your hair, your skin, your nails. It's a complete number that's made up of a bunch of different things included in your entire body. And a lot of people look at the scale as something that's determining their progress and if they're losing body fat. But the scale is showing you a much bigger piece, and it's telling you your full body composition. And we can interpret that data very differently based on our mindset around the scale, based on the way that we view progress and what we have learned and taught ourselves through the years of how to actually see progress. And I will say that as a fitness coach, this is the most common issue when it comes to seeing progress or feeling defeated, is tying our emotions or tying our results to the number on the scale without fully understanding what that number represents and how it's making up our entire body composition and what that means. Because I've had many clients who have weighed the exact same and their transformation photos are completely different. And muscle weighs more than body fat in terms of density. So 1 pound of muscle and 1 pound of fat are going to look drastically different in comparison of size and volume. So for muscle mass, it's going to be much more condensed and smaller, but it's also much denser. And for fat, it's much lighter, but it's going to take up more space. So you could weigh the exact same weight, but have a completely different body composition, and you're going to look drastically different. So weight isn't not something that you should be necessarily weighing your progress against, and it shouldn't be something that is your only determination of success. Weight can cue into a lot of different things, and I personally, as a fitness coach, like to look at your weight for things like your sleep, comparing it to your energy, where you're at in your cycle, and just overall water retention, especially from a week-to-week basis. It's not going to necessarily show the full picture in terms of how much fat loss you've had or how much muscle gain you've had. And if you are in the process of building more muscle mass and losing body fat, it is very likely that you could lose a pound of fat and build a pound of muscle mass, and the scale will not change. Your body composition is completely different. So it's very important that you understand that distinction, because if you're only using the scale as your measurement of progress, you're going to find yourself getting really defeated, and something that could be working is going to tell you that it's not working if that's your only measurement of progress. And therefore, it's going to cause you to quit plans or just move things around that would potentially hurt your progress down the line, because you're no longer being consistent with time under tension, which is the main thing that's going to help you see the best results, is the amount of time that you consistently do something with your strength training, with your nutrition, and giving yourself enough time under tension to see results. So if that's something that is preventing you from seeing results right now, I want you to understand the distinction between how it actually looks at your body mass versus how it looks at your fat loss. Especially as a female, I always like to point this out. It is very normal for most women to change anywhere from 2 to 8 pounds on a day-to-day basis, especially based on their hormonal cycle and where they're at in their cycle. And there's often cues to this. Everyone is so different. I have some clients who very much weigh on the other end of the scale, where they have a lot of change and fluctuation, closer to around 6 to 8 pounds on a weekly basis. And that's just normal for them. That's the way that your body retains water. That's how your body is fluctuating week to week with hormone changes. And it's just how your body responds. And then I have other clients who know that they're going to sit around that 1 to 4 pound scale. And it's very different from person to person. So it's not necessarily bad that your body does one or the other, but it's important to understand that 2 to 8 pounds is a normal range for you to see on a day-to-day basis. And you can be holding a lot more water, especially based on where your hormones are at, how balanced your hormones are, how your sleep was, how your energy was, how much water you had. But then also your cycle is going to be a contributing factor to that. So if you are only looking at that number on the scale as determining a fat loss and not looking at the other metrics that it's actually telling you in terms of your body mass, you're going to find yourself getting defeated and you're going to find yourself feeling like nothing's going to work for you. So that's the very first thing that you need to understand when you're reframing your mindset around how you're going to recomp, because the scale is not actually going to tell you a lot about your progress. And if I was going to tell you to throw away one thing specifically around the metrics that you're tracking, it would be the scale. And I'll give you a good example of this. I have not weighed myself in years. I could tell you the general range that I'm at because I've stayed pretty consistent from year to year because I go to the doctor and I get told my weight at those appointments. However, I do not weigh myself pretty much ever, just because it really doesn't dictate my progress. Clothes are one thing that I use to dictate my progress. If my clothes change or if from season to season I notice that I'm not fitting in the same things, that will tell me that something is changing, that my body is changing and there's something changing overall. If I notice changes in the mirror or in my progress photos or my measurement, those are all dictations that either mass is changing and I'm increasing in muscle mass, or if they're going down, that I'm losing muscle mass or I'm losing body fat. And that's where my body composition is changing. But just looking at the number on the scale really doesn't tell me a whole lot. It's something that I'm like curious around just because I'm a fitness coach. Like I personally like to look at the data. I like to analyze the data. So there's times that I'll look at, okay, I know that I fluctuate between 2 to 4 pounds on a general day, just based on how my sleep was, how consistent I've been, what my nutrition looks like, if I've had an extra sodium meal or if I've had a takeout meal or if I am on my cycle and I know the fluctuations there. But if I fluctuate outside of that, or if that's something that's continuously trending up or continuously trending down, that is a determinant of actual progress on the scale in terms of either building mass or gaining weight or losing mass and losing weight. If it's continuous trending down or continuously trending up, that is determining that something is happening. You are eating in a surplus in some capacity, or you are training in a way that's helping you build more mass. And then the same is true reversely, as if you are eating in a caloric deficit or if you are losing body mass, you're going to start to see that weight trending down. But it doesn't tell you what you are losing and what you are gaining. The weight just trends up. And unless you're actually looking at your body composition, you have no way to know, are you building muscle mass or are you gaining body fat? Are you losing muscle mass or are you losing body fat? They're very different. And the only way for you to know that is if you measure your body composition. So just the number on the scale doesn't dictate progress. You have to look at overall body composition. And if you're not going to track that data, you have other tools that you can use to track that data. It doesn't need to be that you go out and you get a body scan every single day or you buy a scale that tracks all of those things. Because while they can be useful, it still is not the sole insight into what is happening, especially if you're not analyzing the bigger picture. You're not looking at all of the different options when it comes to how your body is changing. There's different signals you need to be looking at, and there's different ways you need to be approaching your progress overall, not just looking at the scale. So when you're looking at a body recomp, this is something that generally will take more time. And the reason being is because when you are building muscle mass, you will start to eat in a caloric surplus, meaning you are going to be consuming more energy than you're burning. And the entire goal with that is because muscle mass does not grow or develop under a calorie deficit. You need more energy to build more muscle mass. And let me explain what that means. If you are in a caloric deficit, your body is going to be primed to thrive. It wants you to survive and it wants you to be in the best position to do so. But there are essential functions that require energy first, and it's going to go to all of those areas first. Then when you're in a caloric deficit, the goal of being in a deficit is going to be taking fat mass as your energy source so that you can replace the energy that is still needed, or you're not going to have enough energy to basically go to all of the essential functions that your body needs. So it's going to have to pull from stores. And your goal is to do that through optimizing your nutrition and training in a specific way that's going to maintain the mass that you currently have so that your body is pulling from fat as an energy source and it's not pulling from muscle mass as an energy source. However, if that is not properly aligned, your body is going to go for muscle mass first. And the reason being is because most people will undereat weight without any structure around their nutrition. And calories dictate your weight, while macros dictate your body composition. So if you're just eating in a deficit, your body is going to pull from the easiest source first that it can for energy. And if you're not focused on eating enough protein and you're not eating enough carbs and you're not replenishing the stores that it's taking from your muscle mass, then your body is going to use the calories, or it's going to use the energy that it can as quickly as it possibly can and from the easiest source, which is generally muscle mass. And then you have to eat in a way that's nutritionally dense, that's going to allow your body to replenish those stores. So we're not pulling away energy from it, we're replacing the energy from it. And if you don't eat in that way, let's say you're eating under the protein that you need to maintain your current mass, or you're not eating enough carbohydrates, and your only goal is to eat in a caloric deficit as low as you possibly can, your body's going to pull from your muscle mass. Your weight may go down, but that doesn't mean that you're actually seeing progress where you want. And you might end up storing more body fat if you do it too long, because your metabolism is going to optimize itself so that it is going to adapt, and it's going to adapt to its environment. So if you're in a caloric deficit for too long, your body then adapts knowing we don't know if we're going to go back up in calories, and we need to conserve energy. And in order to do so, we need to slow down the metabolism so that we're not burning as many calories as we once needed. And when that happens, that can slow down the amount of fat loss that you have and the amount of results that you have. And that is just a natural effect of dieting and being in a caloric deficit. So that's why it's so important that when you're doing a diet plan or when you're in a caloric deficit, that it's not something that you think of doing forever until you reach your goal. And it's not something that you go all the way to the lowest amount of calories that you can consume right away, because you have nowhere to go from there. You've reached the floor and now you're stuck, because now you're in a place where your body has adapted, your metabolism has slowed, and your progress still hasn't happened. Or maybe you're not seeing the results that you thought because you're not in a process of maintaining mass and losing body fat. You're in a process of losing weight because you're in a caloric deficit, and your body is trying to use up as much energy as it can and what's readily available because it wants to optimize the process. So it's a very strategic process when you want to lose body fat. That being said, it's a much easier goal to achieve if you're focused on one specifically, because you can go into a caloric deficit, you can go to a calorie surplus, you can train a specific way, and you can manipulate your body to see those results over time by doing slow transitional changes week over week or month over month. And it's much easier to do that. What is harder is to do a recomp, which is doing both at the same time, because you cannot technically be in a calorie surplus and lose body fat. You cannot be in a calorie deficit and build muscle mass, but you can manipulate the process in a way that is strategic so that you are eating in a way nutritionally that's going to balance and build muscle mass, as well as training in a way that's going to allow you to build muscle mass through resistance training. And then you can add in cardio to effectively help you burn fat by adding into your deficit. You can reach a step goal by adding to your deficit, and you can eat in a nutritionally dense way that's going to allow you to eat higher volume, higher protein, and allow you to still see some results. The downside of that is progress is generally slower because it does take time at that point to be effective. You won't see results as quickly as if you were just focused on a fat loss goal or building muscle mass, because you're focused on one specific goal and you're tailoring everything to match that goal. Whereas when you're doing a recomp, it takes time if you're not focused on one or the other more heavily. And you need to be very strategic about this approach to see results, especially long-term results. It's not something that's going to happen in 4 months for most people. Most of the time, a successful body recomp happens over a longer period of time of 6 to 12 months, because it allows for time under tension, it allows for intensity to build, and it allows you to be in a steady state that allows you to not only see fat loss, but also build muscle mass, because muscle takes time. And if you think of it realistically, you're basically going to be in a slight deficit or surplus when you're doing it with this approach. Whereas when you go the other direction of either fat loss or building muscle mass, you're in a more steep deficit or in a steep surplus that allows you to focus on one direction, and that's going to make your results much faster. So when you do a body recomp, it's not that it's impossible, but it's where a lot of women will get stuck because they start to focus on how fast progress is happening. And when it doesn't happen in a 4 or 6 week period, it starts to feel like, well, is this even working? Especially when you don't have any background or understanding of how it works and the strategic process of it. The other area that I see a lot of women get stuck is knowing what to do next, because a lot of times you can start to see progress in maybe like a 6 or 12 week window. But what happens after that when progress stalls? Either you've cut your calories or you've started training specifically, and maybe you saw some results right away. You saw some energy improvements, some sleep improvements, and digestion improvements in 4 weeks. Then you started to see that you were getting a little bit stronger in the gym around 4 to 6 weeks. Then you saw that around 8 weeks, you started to notice some different things. You felt slimmer in the waist, your clothes started fitting better, and you started to just feel a little bit more confident. Around 12 weeks, you start to notice, okay, this is actually working. I feel a little bit better. I definitely saw some decrease in weight on the scale. I'm noticing I'm stronger in the gym, and I just feel more toned overall. Then things start to stall out. Things stop moving because now you're at a 12-week mark where most things start to kind of adapt. Your body has adapted to its environment, it's adapted to its training, and it's adapted to its nutrition. And the question is, where do you go next? Do you switch up your nutrition? Do you switch up your training plan? Do you start adding in different exercises? What do you need to focus on here? And this is where a lot of women get stuck and they don't really know what's happening or what to focus on next. And I will say a recomp is the most effective on people who are upper beginners, who are just starting out lifting weights, and who are more working on building muscle mass, because you're coming from a place where you may not have a lot of mass and you have a lot to build, and your body is going to kind of reconstitute and rebuild when you're adding more strength and resistance, and when you are focusing on eating nutritionally right. If you're going from a lifestyle where you're not very active, where your nutrition isn't primarily focused, where you're not eating a lot of protein, and you're trying to kind of clean all those things up, you're going to see the best effects there when you're trying to do a recomp, because your body is going to utilize everything and try and help you build more muscle mass. Where I see a lot of women struggle is when they're pretty far into their fitness journey. They have a decent amount of muscle mass. They've been dieting for years, and now they're in a place of trying to maybe change up a little bit of body fat, whether they want to lose 5 to 10 pounds or if they just want to lean out a little bit more. That's where a body recomp is a little bit harder. And it's generally more effective at this point to kind of look at where your metabolism is at and build you up into more of a reverse, get you a little bit closer to maintenance if you're in a deficit, pay attention to where your nutrition is at, and kind of get those numbers more aligned in terms of your macronutrient distribution. And then focus on bringing you back down into a deficit for a fat loss phase post building up and building more muscle mass. So I would call those two different phases of a bulk phase and a cut phase. And potentially at the starting point, we're going to be looking at a reverse phase as well, which is basically going to build you back up to a point of maintenance, get you closer to that surplus, allow you to build more mass at this point, and then bring your nutrition down calorically so that you can burn body fat effectively while making sure your nutrition is focused on the core components that are going to allow you to maintain the mass that you've built. So there's a lot that goes into it, and it just kind of depends on where you're at in your phase, what your bigger goals are, and looking at your metabolism and where it's at right now. A lot of women that I work with are focused on a chaotic structure when it comes to their nutrition and their training. They're not necessarily doing anything out of clear direction or structure. They're kind of just throwing a bunch of random things at the wall and hoping that they work. And what I mean by this is you have a lot of information that you gather online, whether it is from your favorite nutrition influencer and then your favorite fitness influencer, and then you kind of compile them together. Or if you're using Google and ChatGPT and you're kind of making your own plan. And I can see this get really chaotic really quickly, mainly because the split distribution of your workouts, your nutrition, all of that needs to kind of mesh together so that you see the best results. And when there's a misalignment and you don't know where that misalignment is coming from, you start to guess. So if you are working out consistently 5 days a week and you are eating really clean right now and you're not seeing results, let's say you've been doing this for 4 or 6 weeks and you feel like you haven't seen a scale change, you haven't noticed much change in terms of strength, you haven't noticed much change pretty much overall in terms of everything you're doing, but you feel like you're going to the gym every single day, you're restricting your foods, you're eating really clean, and you're focused on all the right things. So after 4 weeks of being consistent, you should see results. And then this leads you to the on-off cycle of you're really consistent Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday, you figure I might as well enjoy myself a little bit because I'm not seeing progress right now with what I'm doing anyways. Or it's so restrictive that by the time Saturday comes around, you just want to live your life and you just want to experience the things that you used to love. When you're not seeing measurable progress, the discipline kind of starts to trickle away, and you start to notice that you become a little bit less motivated because your discipline is less likely to be rewarded. And you've noticed that the reward isn't as great as the effort. And that causes you to kind of question, okay, do I need to change up my nutrition? Should I stop eating this? Should I stop doing these workouts? And should I switch from strength training to Pilates? And should I focus on 15,000 steps instead of 10,000 steps? And you do really, really well for a couple of weeks. then it feels impossible and you still don't see results. So then you question it again. You take a couple days off. You enjoy your life again because it's been so restrictive. And the cycle continues. And it's a continuous chasing of a reward and a result with chaos in place without structure and systems. If you have no structure behind what workouts you're doing, you have no structure behind your nutrition, and you have no way to understand when things start to plateau or when you stop seeing results as quickly, what to focus on next, you spiral and you start to get a little bit more chaotic with the things that you try. And you start to you find more information online. You might have some more information noise. And now you don't know what to focus on because this person says to do this, and then this person says to do that, and you don't know which one to apply. And it gets overwhelming. And now you're 6 months into the process, right? With maybe some progress, but maybe not as much as you'd like. And it feels like this cycle continues. And I've heavily tried to speak to a lot of the conversations that I have with a lot of you when you tell me that you're struggling to see results and you don't know why, you don't know what's happening. And there's a lack of alignment in what you're focused on. And then when you finally, maybe you have a great plan to start, but when that plateau starts to happen, you don't have a game plan for what to do next. And you don't have anything that's strategic and tangible that is so clear on what to focus on that you feel like you can just take action and do the work every single day. It feels like you show up, you do the work, you don't see the results, and then it gets you into a point of, well, I might as well be able to live my life because I'm burnt out, I'm tired, I'm doing all the right things, and I'm not seeing results, and I just want to enjoy life. And that's a very frustrating place to be, especially if you're working on a recomp. This is where I see most of the frustration come from. And that's generally the most common pain point that I hear, especially from women who are trying to do a recomp, because it does take a much longer period of time in order to see a successful recomp, especially if you're not new to fitness and you've been doing training for a really long time. And now we're just trying to tweak things. Maybe you're really lean. You've seen a lot of results from the workouts that you've done and the nutrition you've done. And now you want to build your glutes up, but you still don't want to put on too much body fat. That can be a really complicated area, and it can be very defeating if you're not focused on the right things and you don't have strategy behind how you're doing your recomp, specifically around the load that you're doing, making sure that you are focused on not only compound movements, but isolated movements in order for you to build your glutes up. And then also making sure that your nutrition is correlated along with some less cardio. That's not going to overdo it and cause you to basically reverse what you've been doing in your training because you're eating up your muscle mass by doing too much cardio and not eating enough. So it has to be very strategic, but it also, if you're going about it that route, it's going to take longer because now we're trying to effectively balance both out. And it's really hard to do that when you're trying to keep it balanced versus weighing on the caloric surplus or the caloric deficit side of the scale. Let's talk about the 3 core things that you need for a successful recomp. The first is going to be a progressive training split. You need an effective training split that is going to be focused on resistance training. It's going to be focused on load and going to be focused on consistency. Your primary goal in your training needs to be focused on building muscle mass and doing it through a heavy load, meaning you need to have intensity in your training. This cannot be workouts that you go and you do 10 to 12 reps. They're easy, they're moderate weight, and you could do 5 to 10 more reps of that weight. This needs to be a heavy load exercise, and you need to be training to failure effectively in these workouts, meaning it can't just be failure where you're pushing through with momentum, you're not focusing on mind muscle connection, and it's really just using momentum to drive the exercise. It needs to be effective and form is correct. You're paying attention to the mind muscle connection, meaning if you're doing a bicep curl, you feel the movement in your bicep and your form is proper. So we're not swinging up our elbow, we're not disengaging the muscle group by using momentum to get the weight up. It needs to be effective so that you can use a weight that is challenging, that allows you to fall within the rep range of around 6 to 12 reps, and you're within proximity of failure, meaning you're between 0 to 2 reps to failure. So if you're within that 6 to 12 rep range, wherever your rep range goal is, I would generally say that's going to be for most people between 8 to 10 reps. You want to find failure at that mark. And within each set change, you want to increase your load. So maybe the first 2 sets, you're at a lower weight that's going to allow you to get to 10 reps to failure. Then you're going to increase your weight, and you basically want to challenge yourself by decreasing your reps. So with that weight increase, you're only going to be able to get to 8 reps before you hit failure. That's going to ensure that you have good, strong connection with your mind muscle connection, but that you're also effectively training that muscle group to failure. So the 3 things: load, volume, and proximity to failure. Those are going to be included in your progressive resistance training. And you need to ensure that you have a progressive plan for this. If you're not seeing changes in terms of intensity, weights, reps, or sets in your training, then you need to either push yourself a little bit harder, or you need to look at where you might be too low in terms of nutrition that you can't add strength because you don't have enough energy in order to do so. This needs to be something that's continuous. It's not going to necessarily happen week to week, but if it's not happening continuously, you're not going to see changes. Your body's not going to adapt. Split is going to be dependent on what you're trying to recomp. So if you're trying to build up your upper body, then your split is going to primarily focus on upper body. That might be through full body splits and upper body splits, but you want to be primarily focusing on training that muscle group every 48 to 72 hours. You still need rest in there. That's really crucial, but you want to make sure that you're training that in a 48 to 72 hour window period. Same is true as if you're trying to grow your lower body. You would need to be focusing on that as a primary, and your split would be dependent upon what you're trying to build. The next is you need to focus on adequate energy availability. Basically, your energy source is going to come from nutrition. If you are in a caloric deficit and you're eating too calorically low, your body is going to have to adapt and it's going to have to get energy elsewhere. If you're doing that in hopes of eating as little as possible and building muscle mass, you're going to be very disappointed. You have to be eating in a way that is going to support your energy load. It's going to support your training. So you have to eat enough protein, carbs, and overall calories in order for you to sustain a recomp. Because in order to build muscle mass, you have to be eating enough energy that your body can convert that into the places it needs. Carbs and calories are going to be your energy source primarily. These are going to be crucial in order for you to sustain energy and sustain load during your training. If you're eating too low, it's going to affect three different things. First, it's going to reduce your thyroid output, which is going to affect your energy and your hormones. Second, it's going to elevate your cortisol levels, which can affect your overall stress and ability to lose body fat. And then third, it's going to impair recovery. You're going to notice that in between sessions, you don't feel as recovered and you're going to feel more sore, and it's going to be harder for you to increase weight, train to failure, and you're going to notice yourself getting really fatigued here. This is going to drastically impair your results because you're not going to be able to perform your best. And if you can't perform your best, you're not going to be able to see the results that you want. You need to be able to perform in the gym, recover, and rest so that you can rebuild and perform again. And this is going to come from rest, recovery, and your nutrition. So those need to all be aligned and provide adequate energy availability so that your body can use this in a way that's going to be effective from week to week. And then lastly, and probably the most important one of a recomp, is sufficient protein intake. If you're not eating enough protein and you're just following the baseline, which I hear this one a lot, is I'm eating 100 grams of protein. This is a generic number that has been given out somewhere on social media that's just kind of been trending and a lot of people are using as information. And here's the thing, 100 grams of protein is a great starting point if you're not eating enough protein. But there's a specific protein goal that you're going to need to be hitting based on your biomarkers and your biometrics. And if you're just focusing on 100 grams of protein, that could be sufficiently under the amount that you need, especially to build muscle mass. If you're weighing at 150 to 170 pounds, we're not even close to that 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight for you to be within that protein goal that's going to help you see the best results from your body recomp. So if you're in that 100 grams and that's all you're eating, that would be the first place that I would have you look, because your nutrition needs to be broken down into enough protein. It's going to allow you to sustain energy and allow you to activate that protein synthesis process specifically after your training and help you build more muscle mass. Your protein target is going to be very different, and it's going to be based on what's relative to your body weight, but also relative to your goals. Like I said, anywhere from 0.8 to 1 gram is a good guideline for figuring out where you should be at as a sufficient level, but also as kind of like a baseline. It's going to be dependent upon how much training you do, how much recovery time you have, as well as how much cardio you're doing so that you're making sure you're getting enough. So that's not necessarily just going to be the perfect number, but that's kind of a great place to start, especially if you have no idea how much protein to eat. Protein is going to be the crucial component of your macronutrients that's going to help you feel full throughout the day. It's going to help you keep yourself fuller between meals because it takes longer in the thermodynamic process to break down protein. You're going to not only burn energy while eating protein and digesting protein, but you're also going to take longer in between digestion process. So you're going to slow down the time that hunger picks back up and you're going to feel fuller longer. It's also a key part of protein synthesis to occur. And without it, you can't activate protein synthesis, which in layman's terms basically means your workout is wasted if you're not effectively using protein or eating enough protein protein because your body has no way to recover and rebuild. And then lastly, its most important part in a recomp is it's going to help you retain muscle mass. It's going to be very effective for lean mass retention. If you want to see muscle mass increase and body fat decrease, you need to fully be focused on protein and make sure that you're getting an adequate amount. Next, I want to talk about probably the most common reasons I see that you're not seeing results, especially if you're focused on a recomp, and what that looks like. The first is that you're training really hard, but you're not training in a progressive overload state, or you're not training progressively. You're only focused on going to the gym, working out really hard, maybe doing the workout that you saw somebody else do, maybe your favorite influencer, and you're bouncing between them. And you're just focused on maybe how much you sweat or how hard the workout feels, but you're not necessarily looking at the core component of, is this a progression from last week, or is this a progression from last month? Am I seeing strength improvements? Am I seeing reps and sets increase? Am I seeing weight increase? Where is the progression happening? Because if you're not challenging yourself, you're not changing yourself. It's important to look at that in your training and make sure that you're applying that consistently. The next is that you're eating too little, or you're not eating in a way that's strategically aligned for the outcome that you want. A lot of times I hear just eating as little as possible. And while that can be effective for weight loss, that's not effective specifically for body recomposition and specifically for maintaining lean mass, which most people I would say would probably want more lean mass, want to look lean and toned, and they want to look like they have definition. If you're just eating a caloric deficit and you're not paying attention to the macro distribution, or you're not paying attention to the strategic part of your nutrition and you're just eating as little as possible, you're going to affect your progress in terms of maintaining muscle mass and building muscle mass. And you're more than likely not going to see a lot of results because now we're really just affecting our metabolism. We're not necessarily encouraging muscle mass development or body fat loss. Now we're just kind of slowing things down and slowing our metabolism down. We're not necessarily focusing on anything effective when it comes to nutrition. We're just eating as calorically little as our body is going to allow us before we hit a breaking point. The third is expecting the scale loss to dictate your progress over looking at body composition changes. Like we mentioned in the beginning, if you're only looking at the scale, that's going to drastically impact your progress if that's the only metric we're looking at, because it's not necessarily going to change week to week. It's not necessarily going to change drastically. And the goal of a body recomp is for you to increase muscle mass and decrease body fat. When that happens, that sometimes means that the scale levels out because you could be losing a pound of fat, building a pound of muscle mass, and nothing is going to change on that number. But your body composition is completely changing. So we're only looking at the scale as determinative progress, and we're specifically looking at that scale to go down. And if that's determining the progress before we quit, then we're going to be really disappointed by results. And the other aspect of that I see is women thinking that just because the scale goes up, that they're gaining fat, when in reality, a lot of times that's water retention, that's hormones affecting your water retention, and it's just a different change in your overall mass. It's not necessarily a body composition change. A good way to understand this is if you wanted to lose a pound of fat, you would have to undereat or be in a caloric deficit of 3,500 calories. So you would have to eat 3,500 calories more than your maintenance level calories in order to build or gain a pound of fat. So if you're already in a deficit, let's say by 500 calories, you would have to eat 1,000 calories a day extra in order for you to build or to gain an extra pound of fat a week. And that's just not generally something that's happening. It's possible. I've seen it before, but it doesn't mean that most women are dealing with that. Most women, especially if you're seeing the scale go up 2, 3, 4 pounds, is dealing with maybe one off meal, not as much water, sleep is different, stress is different, or you are hormonally changing, you're at a different point of your cycle and you're having some water fluctuations. Program hopping is another one where you start to change your plan up or you start to focus on different things when you see new information, whether that is jumping from Pilates to strength training to different workout programs from week to week, and really just focusing on overall movement versus an actual progressive plan that's designed around the goal that you want to achieve. So if you're constantly program hopping, specifically week to week, or even within a 4 to 6 week period, you're not going to see the best results. You really need to be sticking to a plan anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks to see the best results, and building load in between and focusing on intensity and progression there. Lack of recovery or not proper recovery, whether that is poor diet, sleep, too much stress, not focused on adequate recovery in between training sessions or working different muscle groups, that's all going to impair your success and impair your muscle development. So you might not see results if you're not focused on those areas. Specifically, I see this a lot with stress. I see this if you're not sleeping enough, you're going to really affect your ability to lose body fat. But then also if you're not recovering in between workout sessions, you're not going to be able to build muscle mass at that point because your body needs to rest and repair in order to build strength. And then the last one, which is my favorite one because this is the most common one, and it is inconsistent execution masked by perceived effort. What I mean by this is because you are working out really hard, because you are doing something that effectively feels challenging. You are thinking of that mindset as it should deliver results and reward when you have inconsistent effort or you have an inconsistent approach to your training plan, which is therefore causing you not to see the best results, whether that is in terms of you not building enough mass, if it's lack of structure, if it's lack of consistency, or if it's just overall craziness. Because just because you're going to the gym 5 days a week, or just because you're eating clean, doesn't mean that you're in a caloric deficit, eating the right amount of protein, or eating the right foods for the best results. And it doesn't mean that your workout routine, that's what have you go to the gym 2-3 hours a day for 5 days a week, is helping you build muscle mass. It means that you are wasting effort or you're using up effort in a way that you're hoping that will build reward. And just because you have effort does not mean that you're going to see results or reward. What builds reward and builds results is consistency, time under tension, and structured approach to your training and nutrition. So let's talk through some of the biggest myths that I hear in terms of why women don't think that they're seeing results and just myths around derailing your progress in general. The first is that lifting weights will make you bulky. That is myth humorous just because as somebody who has lifted weights for over 10 years now, and primarily because one of my goals is to be a little bit bulky. For example, if I could achieve anything with my training, it would be to have more round shoulders. And I would love to see more mass on my shoulders. While that's not everyone's goal, that's personally something that I think is such a powerful and strong look, especially on females. And I just love the aesthetic look of it. Definitely not something that most women want, I will say, and definitely not something that even my husband agrees with, Sean. But anyways, the reason I find this so humorous is because I can tell you that I have effectively been training in a way that is designed to help me do that and achieve that goal over the last 5 years. And I still to this day struggle drastically with putting on mass in my shoulders. First, you have no control over where your body loses weight, builds muscle mass. You have a genetic makeup that your body is going to prioritize. And that's the unfortunate aspect of weight loss and building muscle mass is you really don't have a choice. Some people carry it in their midsection. Some people carry it in their lower body. Some people carry it in their upper body. It's very different for everybody. For me, I really don't have a muscle structure that allows me to build muscle mass in my shoulders. However, I do have the ability to build muscle mass in my quads and in my glutes. And even through trying to build muscle mass in my shoulders, as well as trying to build muscle mass in different areas of my body, I have followed a pretty consistent 4 to 5 day split for the last 10 plus years. And the goal of building muscle mass. And I can tell you that I have not become bulky. And even if I wanted to become bulky, it really wouldn't be possible. And this is coming from somebody who's tried, this is something that I think most women misunderstand because there are women out there who have a bulky physique and that is not natural. And that is not a natural response specifically for the female makeup. You are made up with more estrogen and more progesterone and more feminine hormones that are going to store more body fat, but also that are not going to cause you to have that bulky physique that maybe a man would have because they are built up of more testosterone. It is not something that naturally happens, even if you're really consistent. But it's also something that requires a lot of nutrition and a lot of a caloric surplus in order for that to happen. So it's not going to happen naturally, and it's specifically not going to happen if you're at a caloric deficit, which I will say most women that are fearful of being bulky are already in a caloric deficit, or they're already focused on the mindset of dieting. So it's not really possible. It's not something that's going to, one, happen naturally, but two, it's something that you have to be very intentional about because you have to be training in a way that applies so much time under tension to a certain muscle group in order for it to grow, which is going to be 2 to 3 times, maybe more than that, training each week with an insane amount of load because we're really trying to build up that muscle mass, which requires time under tension, load, consistency, and then nutrition. You have to refuel. And that means you're going to have to be eating in a caloric surplus in order to build more muscle mass. So it's just not likely to happen. And the ones that I've seen where I'm like, that person is very bulky, it's generally not natural. It's something with an enhancement, a hormone enhancement, growth hormones, things like that are added in. And it's not something that generally will happen specifically to most women, especially if you're not trying for it. It's not going to happen. That's the best way I can explain it. And I can be honest as somebody who's tried over and over again and has been defeated over and over again, no matter how hard I've tried, it's much harder than you think. Definitely not as easy as you think. The next is more cardio equals more fat loss or faster fat loss. Cardio is a very strategic thing that you have to be careful with because doing too much cardio is going to deplete you of your glycogen stores, which is your energy sources. It's going to cause your hunger to skyrocket if you're doing too much of it, or if you're doing too high intensity cardio, or if you're doing too much cardio like running. High intensity cardio can really deplete you and cause your stress hormones to skyrocket, which is going to cause cortisol to skyrocket. When that happens, it actually causes fat loss to slow down. And you can actually build up fat loss around your midsection. So no, fat loss is not more effective by more cardio or faster by more cardio. Strategic cardio, it's going to be focusing on fat loss specific cardio. This is going to be like list cardio, low intensity steady state, incline walking, things like that. Those are going to be fat loss specific cardio. And it needs to be sprinkled in based on your plan so that's effective. Should not be chaotic cardio that you're just doing as much cardio as you possibly can. That's not going to do much in terms of fat loss. It's actually going to probably do more damage than good, especially if it's causing your hunger to increase or your cortisol to increase. A sweaty workout is an effective workout. If you didn't sweat, it's not an effective workout, or if you didn't burn 400 calories. I'm reading this from questions that I've gotten. So the short answer is your trackers and your fitness trackers are not accurate in terms of necessarily the calories that are burned or what's more importantly happening when it's showing you that number. And I'll dive into that a little bit more, but also that just because you were sweating means that it was more effective. If you weren't sweating, it wasn't effective. Sweating is associated with heat and thermodynamics. So it's basically the amount of heat that you create in your body that's causing you to sweat. And for example, a lower body workout is going to cause you to sweat a lot more than an upper body workout because you're using more muscle groups and it's usually a heavier load that you can do because you're using, for example, when you do a deadlift, you're still using upper body strength, even though it's a lower body exercise. And that's going to allow you to distribute the weight and allow you to add more weight. When you're doing a bicep curl, that's more of an isolated movement that's focused on upper body only, and you're not going to be able to do as much load. And therefore, the load distribution is going to really determine the amount of energy that you're going to exert. So you're going to probably sweat more on a lower body day than you are an upper body day. Same is true with cardio. Just because you're doing cardio, it's going to put you into a place where you're exerting a lot of energy, increasing the amount of oxygen that you're using, which is going to cause your heart rate to go up. And then it's going to cause you to basically sweat more. Just because you're doing more cardio doesn't mean that was more effective than your strength training workout. And let me bridge the two together because this is what I meant in the beginning about your calories burned on your tracker isn't always the best determinant of success or fat loss. If you're doing strength training, you might burn less calories than you would in a cardio workout. But the long-term effects of building more muscle mass is that your body is going to increase the amount of energy it requires to sustain each day, which is going to increase your metabolic rate, which is going to in turn mean your body's going to burn more body fat on its own. Cardio is going to help you lose body fat, but it's isolated. You don't build muscle mass, which is a long-term goal. And even though your watch says, hey, you burned 400 calories and you sweat a lot in this workout for your cardio workout and you burned 300 calories or maybe a little bit under that, and you weren't sweating as much in your lifting workout is more effective because long-term it's going to have a better effect on your metabolism and it's going to help you kind of shift into a fat burning mode long term. So it's not necessarily that it's about sweating or about how many calories you burned as much as the effectiveness of the workout and the long-term goal. So no matter what your goal is, I want to leave you with this today with the podcast episode. If you're doing Recomp right now, just please understand that this is something that takes time, takes strategy, a lot of consistency and structure. You need to have a good plan of what you're doing, how it's going to be effective, how you're going to stick to it consistently, and how you're going to be tracking progress long term because it's really about consistency and time under tension, but it's also needing to be strategic to the specific goal you have, meeting you where you're at and help you kind of build that mass as well as simultaneously turning your body into a fat burning machine. Patience is going to be your friend here. Consistency is going to be your friend here. And the more effectiveness that you're going to get from a routine is focusing on the ability to do the work and stay disciplined without instant gratification or reward and just kind of pushing through here with consistency and structure in your training plan. If you're struggling with this, I have a guide down below that will kind of walk you through why you're stuck. It gives you a scorecard and gives you areas to kind of look at in terms of your nutrition, your training, your consistency, kind of piece together the areas that you might need to focus more on or where you might be specifically stuck. That's completely free. You can find that down below. If you're looking for support, there's a lot of different ways that we can work together, that ways you can work with me. So you can find all of this information in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast episode, and I'll talk to you next week in the next episode.